Rinpoche, venerable monks, and everybody else, a very warm welcome to this talk organised by the Cambridge University Buddhist Society. It is a true privilege to be able to listen to Khenpo Sudaje Rinpoche speaking this evening. He is one of the most eminent teachers of the Buddha Dharma in China and becoming increasingly known in the West as well. He had a thorough and deep training in Tibetan Buddhist theory and practices, so he had the traditional Tibetan Buddhist training for a monk. And since then, he's devoted himself for the last 30 years to making the Buddha Dharma accessible to as many people as possible in a form that enabled lay people as well as monks to have a really thorough Buddhist education. If you were watching the video earlier, Khenpo Rinpoche is the senior teacher at Larongga Five Sciences Buddhist Institute, Buddhist Academy, and he's using the internet and increasingly making contact in the West. He's visited many universities in the West in order to, I think, get us to engage with this extraordinary set of teachings. So he comes from a deeply traditional Tibetan Buddhist background, but he's very involved in integrating traditional Buddhist practices with the problems of the modern world. And he's also very interested and engaged in integrating what could be taken as a contemplative tradition with action out there in the world. He's founded a charity to support education, to support nursing care. He stresses the importance of compassion and looking after the poor, not just sitting on the cushion and practicing for ourselves. And in the case of Cambridge, yes, this is a place of great privilege, but it is also, as many of you here will know, a place where there is also a lot of suffering. Suffering that comes from modern lifestyle, suffering that just comes from being human beings. And what the Buddha Dharma has to offer all of us is some sort of way of finding healing for that suffering. So very much in the spirit of Khenpo Rinpoche's wish to help all of us find our own way, that he's going to give a talk tonight on the Buddha's path in practice, an end in itself or a means to a better world.
Tera Lopchandani Tani the Nautanga Chutsoko Tani Tsokso Tani Letna Marna Yongda the Maimbagan Tani Girgan Tani Lopcho Tamadam Nyam the Dostavi Tani Skachapshati Lojon Shiki Korku Shongala Naroni Nyan Tapa and Gaps Gapchuchi.
Tonight, to have this opportunity to come here, to give a teaching, also have this opportunity to learn from you, from the members of the Cambridge Students Buddhist Society and teachers, everybody who has come here tonight. Khenpo wants to extend a very heartfelt thanks.
Chapter 로깃니 요니 길근 데 랍트 총아 콩남바 몽보 쳐요레 달로 ngitsundi Thailand shone ya logit ke tani rapto chong mambo dang nyam de lojong shi ji dang tani rolang shi ji korku yabo shong yo shi ji ge ta chun de yin na tani logit ke chu zu da xiang ji ke chu tani wo ji ke chu ta nambak sam ge nga sanjip chondon de ge chulik chaman di yo ne de yin na ta terang deni nginguni na nga so logic na tan chulgware tani terang logic ko ta terang chuchok ko chokso yang mambozu de tani logic na tan chulgwayin sare teni na ngechon ya nyam dam thanjur gurguni tani chama rolang shi jiwon yang chi chatam phobajire.
And looking around the audience, I'm particularly glad to see so many ordained members of the Theravada tradition in the audience. This year in Thailand, we had a conference and I had an excellent opportunity to engage in discussion and exchange with members of the Theravada, the southern tradition. In general, we speak of the southern tradition, the northern tradition, the Tibetan tradition. In any case, they're all part of the Buddha Dharma. And I'm really grateful to have this opportunity, and I hope that we can engage with each other in a very united way.
Tani ngala samsar kare yore jana ta tirap nishiba nzina tani jarkab ko parna yang chi tan chuglong mongo menchuk mongo yo tsi tirap zire tani ta ji chulug parn sam yinna ra man nangkar yang tatsu tajang momboyo saga tirabzire. Ta teni tirab nyerchik bani song teni te zamzi mayo paga. Teni yarkab bar yinnan raga, chulug bar yinnan raga, kharshuk da nufshuk mug warna yang teni ta damchang tirabzayi da tsama pansan nyam da nrera chi tamzu yo tsi tirab muksir janziga song yo re.
So I guess to sort of start off with my thoughts about the 20th century, which is one that was characterized by a great deal of conflict, a great deal of struggles between different peoples, between different religious sects or religious traditions. It was in general a century of great violence. We've now arrived in the 21st century, and in some sense we can see that it has been a time where there has been an opportunity for greater communication and collaboration and cooperation in many fronts.
Ta ndi kapsina tani perna sharshuk nga chu mambo jiga tani nabshuk ta ngubo yarge ya chimbu songyoni tani chanrig lakhsar chanrig shisha ndzo tamchat flojong shi dana tani rangrang sosun choi nangda pechchu sheyang shegonre karsan derang sharsho eshiya ga yarkab mambo jiga nabshuk chanrig dela tani tani yarge phusum soba rodang rojin bare 대당 라와고 ngazu nufshugna yuni tani ji shion ba yin nan ra loma yin nan ra sin na yang ngazu sharshug bana tani sharshug ta sanglu parmjur sanglu tani shion yang samgi me ba za na ni ta war de hagon re ndso yang chit de la songwe da lojong shi ji zina chigde sharnam nyamjer yong ji da ni se anna dang tangrap 안나당 니가 냠저 용지 단데라 녜테나 구바 첨부 득삼
어디 탐보지를
가쇼고 뭐 제가 너쇼고 차릭 시릭 로종라 되는 너쇼고 뭐 탐짓 샤르크다리 출르다 르니 안나다 땅거 되는 카르납다 안나당 니가 판선 로종단 레라시니나 구반도스
So we can see that over the past century and in recent times, using scientific methods that were first developed in the West, people in Eastern countries have been able to improve their material standard of living in certainly in very discernible ways. At the same time, however, the West is also learning from the knowledge traditions, the very amazing knowledge traditions of the East. And so it's my sincere hope, in fact, that people from both parts of the world and can learn from the benefit of each other's traditions.
다 때랑 아주 냠더 드니스 카차샤기 농동 소더 나와 상기비 출루 접설라 때네 더 마오와 다 라닉 그 저데블라나메 파르테르나레다 드니 지 신속 초더 드님 지르드담비 마옴 달람 양탁바즈 춘레제기 단 디르던거 드니 참말라 냐지 도르 디바찬즈 지르기인.
So, in terms of the topic for tonight's teaching, I'm going to be addressing the practice of the Buddha's teachings and whether, in fact, they are a means to gain advancements in a personal practice or whether they are a means for achieving benefit in the wider world.
실 상기가 출력제란데 양 땅 인군이나 루무즈가 드니 짐직다 로종 갈라칸섬 시용레 대인디 니 스타츠르즈라 가리즈나 따드나 상기가 출력제긴데 배 야치와다 땅 자파 된자가즈리 대인디 쿠 점제의 다 측직다 아니고 저다 진동 촌고나 대 하장 가변에 시켜와즈리
Chizuri?
다 측용용스 그리고 그 산지가 잡지가 죽음 제번도 잠판 주치제단 랑거 대화 냠섬 용치제르고나 더 측용시즈 그리고 배 갈리 카본두.
So I've been engaged in the investigation and the study of Buddhism for a very long time, and in my opinion, when we look at the question of what the Buddha Dharma is and what the Buddhist tradition is, that it is in fact extremely vast, and it's quite difficult to put into a few words what its essence is.
옛날에 tene 추가 다돈도 냠슬랑디 tene 충가리가 나나 남지가 내금나 라니가 타라 양탁바 톱네 타라 양탁바 톱네 tene 고비야 양서 뇽버 지네 다 뇽모와다 등을 짱메피 tene 담 냥을렌데 바제르고난 자가 데스타비 제베 톱기오도요 딱가로 몽우즈 그랑아 데스타고 니르고네레지 텐자양 손사요레.
Of course, it is said that the purpose of practice in the Buddhist tradition is to obtain liberation, is to eradicate one's afflictions, and to pass beyond this existence and abide in the state of nirvana.
양 충가래 그렇감나 제부터 톱송디 제부터 톱냈더니 딱베르나 다리가 샘친 그돈 접교 산기 그 꼬마토 쏘나야 다른 몸터네 되네 샘친 그돈 접교 운동做 옛날에 때려 쏘요래.
According to other ways of saying it, or to other voices of the tradition, after one has obtained Buddhahood, one should exert oneself to the benefit of other beings and dedicate oneself primarily to these tasks.
베나 데 자파츠름 보치 제게도 복고 타거에 나페 냥가바 그바 쳔보즈레 다 콩이 나 길로 지게 다리 겠다나 지게 겠치 캬글로 와르다 다리가 지그니 디모고 라마 짝천즈레 콩고 송니 다 셰슌고 고름 그갑나 저송르잖아 산기 돕기원도야 대 무연 타르트바 마레제 산기 돕네 지실 건전 후 잔돈 잔로아 샘전 담지고 돈 줍기고 단 득조레 제야 베 사로 고네 송레.
In the words of Palchu Rinpoche, who was an extremely renowned master from the Tibetan tradition who lived in the 19th century, he said in reference to the objectives of Buddhahood that obtaining Buddhahood is not, he said very clearly, it's not to obtain Buddhahood as an objective or a means in itself, but rather to use one's Buddhahood for the benefit of other sentient beings.
girgangare yang songondo huerna ta chu zigide ngoma kasang derang ge roa ge matamche ge nat serer shijit nat serze ge tene pena man tabare zendo tang uni che ngasu chu nangdon mashi badana chula chargi mebaina kayo mare tenda kemalin na ya ta na uni ge che chundela jimjig shena da chunde 냠슬레는 젠디 맞수 머라나 소수 샘컴나 판토 게침보 요크요레.
Tonight when I met earlier with Dr. Rachel, she likened the Buddha Dharma to an extremely healing medicine for many people in today's age. This is very, very much the case. Of course, to people who don't have an understanding of the contents of the teachings or don't have a great familiarity, then, well, it's difficult to say. But to people who commit themselves to understanding the teachings and to practicing the teachings, the benefit can be very, very great indeed.
다 랑아 지금 냠레 시사가 추 샘는 거 낫다 등을 세시 그 때다 추직면나 가성되는 거 신속도 촉직네 되나 배 응보 빠르용 열기 되니 추르근 직전이나 앉아 코리기 있나 앉아 끈거 타는 양 뒤로 가마다 잡들시니나 로미 로르기타나 되니 배 만자와 그 열기 퍼섬 소바 쇼요기 뒤수 된다가 되요래 양 촉직네 되네나 ngasu roa maga tene nang semgi dingmer nang semgi nazik tele jang chabram phaba dik hajan cheba dingmer chiraba tendabe ne sikero.
On the one hand, we can say that the current age that we live in is certainly unprecedented in terms of the degree of development of external material conditions. At the same time, it is also one where probably we are at a point of unprecedented suffering as well.
가리제나 가선대랑 다 당선 그 뒤촌데라 되니 코리거 되니 코리 막족스 기르네 다 가국이 양다바 메바다나 대비전도는 지금 코리 그 야금도 추나나야 딱 멘추 망보 용에다 되네 뭐 탐칠라 된적 메바다 되니 나수 에시아라 소바가 양 야금 망보 제릭 자마다는 디촌양 다 지금 초르된 여보 메니 제릭양 자모라나 빼 만자 망보 따르게 요지 니츠
And all kinds of incidents transpire around us, every day, all the time, whether it be stories of environmental destruction, of pollution, of wars between countries, or as in Asia, particularly in China these days, there's a great deal of worry and concern about food safety, for instance.
페름촌나 네 신이 아르거타바이나 다 로르가니 타가바르도 잔치기 용래 단디 잔치가 여름 초도 다 파르치 뭐음섬다 척지야르물 드네 다리 책쪽 자메트 송에다 셔차리오래.
If we take a look at the Syria conflict, for example, over the past 5 years, approximately 300 people have lost their lives. 300,000 people have lost their lives.
다들이 회남물동 시친 시와 직zam즈 드네 다른 잔치그 코리 그 쳤더나 등을 쌈기면 개밤 용진 요바다. 양다 시와 다 시친 직zam즈그 드네 쳤소 지게 yarmarda 다 이렇게 매대는 사실 소소 캡처한 거고요래. 야 초초 지게야 초초 지게야면서 되네 그런 거 사차나 되네 교사르나 맨득사 이나 메디 다 랑거 이렇게나 다나 김성내사야 메디 된지 빼 만제다리 교육내스 게려요.
And upwards of 1 million people who have been rendered displaced through this conflict too. So there are approximately 600,000 people within the country's borders who now don't have homes, and another 400,000 people who are refugees in bordering countries.
다 당래 상로 당대 군이 나총 주암 참마더 길득 찍바 상로 찍바 연거요래 예요래다 이나야 다 자르급 라라 나한테 띠르타베 그 멘칙 잡침보 쇼용디 되네 베나 유럽 그 자르급 암손네나 되네 자르급 모즈그 다 잡주란도 소땅린 체거요래 엔진이나 간제엔 초랑수 시기래.
So even though, we are all human beings, we are the same in this respect, we're the same in our thoughts, etc. Certainly our circumstances are different depending on where we come from. In some countries there are wars, and then there are countries in Europe, for example, that are on the receiving end of the refugee situation. And as for the response in England to that, I'm sure you're all sure.
가스다리 nga 데 잡주로 안 가래 건 소화가 초다 냠지 렌용아 당 오늘 전에 그런 하장 조보래 드네 다나른 거 도사가 니야메데 점상에면이 멋지가 된다 조르고나 나수 추고나 랑글이라 빼롱네 잔랑 노파 마시지제 베나 랑아 빼롱에 잔거 초라데 간레레 저런 거 또송래 드네 다 닝운이 나 체남발라 지 잡주로가 타그 레와 자지 왕차요 말이다 이나야 나수 다 로미 링가레라 테스타비 등은 정디 상록동 고사스 랩상고요.
And I would urge everybody to really think about what it's like, what the plight of people in a situation in the situation of being a refugee is like, having no safety, no home, having one's immediate existence at threat. Of course, I'm not in a position to make any requests of anybody, but I think this is something that we should definitely cast our minds to and try to empathize with.
디 샤완도 수타네 나 가수 랍도 총아이나 드네 스그 타네 장 왕차다 된자 요 말이다. 옛나양 샘 그다네 자모는 거네 설간당 간이나 가수 상록던 거요.
So even though we might not have any particular power or capacity to do much, nevertheless, we certainly need to really think about this.
가레 선로도나 다 자와 랍도 총아 짜메차 너수 드네 곰바 작푸 드네 다 르서 띠남스 드네 다 코론조 주반양르시 유직능 마토제면 신속고 초다더니 다 말의 용의 시한도 소줍교원도 추양다 말의 썸다 된자 공권이야 요나타.
And in terms of being a monk, being an ordained person, whether or not these outside things are things that we should think about, maybe some people are of the view that the role or the proper role of an ordained person is to reside in their monastic institution, practicing the Dharma according to tradition, and in fact involving oneself or concerning oneself too much with things taking place on the outside world is not appropriate.
다티 다리 공도 집았다래 랍도 총아이 난자가 드니 추박 잠바가 겸바초이 난자가 나추 랭긴 요바치레제나 라니 긍요거 드니 조아 무수 시사가 드니 코리거 드니 뭐 탐치지 난자가 드니 리거 등월 샘거 등월 너수 세리 다다 좀바 쉬지도 네 되나 나추 뭐 참아가 드니 저드 메피 랭겐 But
in my opinion, actually, as an ordained person, and in fact, regardless of whether one is ordained or whether one is a lay person, as a Buddhist, it is really a fundamental responsibility for us to be very concerned about the situation of sentient beings in the environment around us.
신속원에 처리나 갈선대랑 드니 지금 네처 삽친 배 뭔뭐 요거 잔측 마인 바 배나가서 샘는 거 단 나즈 르둥을 너초 있나 잠물는 거 땅나 네페 총사즈 그잖아 다 동체르거나 다 동체르거나 있나 드니 냠저 야속 초르텐 레칸 다 냠저 야속나 다른 초르텐 거 초바요라 다 코츠 거 제니나 드니 단 잠물는 거뭐 탐치 소브르 쉐키 거 드니 락차 위와 너 동체르거나 인세레 다티 루르가 감나 드니 단 잠물는 거뭐 탐치 소시 그 드니 락차 안 땅오도 녀가 나트 아니바도 동체르거나 진세 세요레
So the various challenges that we face in the world obviously are not restricted simply to conflicts. In terms of physical suffering and mental suffering, you know, one thing or maybe one small area or not so small would be that of depression. The WHO has claimed that over the last 5 years, that they have predicted that within the next 20 years, the second major cause of illness in the world will be depression, the first being a heart disease.
다 때랑 네 담보 동체르거나테 디즈제 드니 콤바요나 양이 같이 잠바제요.
So tonight I'd like to say a few things about depression, and then if there's time permitting at the end, then maybe I'll talk about a few other things too.
가르제난데 인지롱바가 원더시나야 다 파르치 뉴 야차니 시르사직 텔라타리 동체르거 나요너르젠도.
And the reason that I'd like to talk about depression is that I have heard that in England 26% of the population suffer from depression.
당이 가선데라데 인기를 약금나 뉴다 시친 다 찌다 하고서 여러와 단그 야찬이 시자지가 주의 결혼데 파르칠 시친 흑지다 더 시총 찌기야말 대인디 파르칠 다 뉴지가 나나다리 동철 그나 흑지기 요차 양초그 송도다 대인디 대랑 아춘디 나나야 당상극 사르지 너소 된니나 오늘 동철 그나 몸몸 버처도 요사 몸보 요시지.
So England, a country with a population of more than 60 million people, if 26% of this population suffers from depression, then that means that approximately 16 million people are suffering from depression. So 1 in every 4 people.
회나 다니르통 주질로 그 야나가 데 종쇼 마마 차버 디르갑나 다니 카선데르 야나나양 다뭐 시친 그 대연초다 다 동치 또 니동 주저글로레 파르치 다 니동 정하글로 달로네 동시르치 연초 뭐요시체 네가마르디 니동 주저레 다텐디 회나 야나 그 동치르 금무 동치르 요차 금무 대소 시케로나 단다나 이탈리레 테네 허난데 테네 다리 응소 인지를 야르고 숨 금mel이야 우가르와즈다 카르즈데르 야능나요 요체이다 jonshuk ikchachakrka naxsaru sheoga.
And in terms of these statistics in China, it's also extremely serious. According to an official count from 2014, it was claimed that 90 million people in China suffer from depression. So, you know, that's the equivalent of a combination of Holland, maybe France and Australia combined together. That many people in China are suffering from depression. Holland, Austria, and England. Yes, all of these countries, their population combined, that many people.
체리드나 땅에 슈르동거 내 동서지다 나가만이 요바지래 거기나 로지 땅 선로다나 더니 다 차릭바 첨부 뉴든 더니 에이스탄 다 콩라소바 베나 아메리게 전전 로스포즈기는다 더니 지지르즈기는다 데르나바 양타렌도 요즈이다는 익차몽부는 셰요레.
So depression is an illness that has existed in the past. It's said that many famous people, including Einstein, Newton, Roosevelt in the States, Churchill in England, all suffered from depression.
Tele mo mambo jigda yang tongchir gna ka shiwa yang sheo re khirna zomba bo chakchen tene gyamcho dang gambo ger zomba bo tene hawi mendana 대전 dana ngotsu yalisto de konso inina 다 하위민 랑가랑아 따리 보고 겨우산래 tene yalisto 인저지나 코럼 초낭암 총너래 따때 마임바가 그러나 시틀 인저지나 양 그런 거 공화 뜨글려대 되고 더 흔으래 반고 인저지나 양 동서가 나가는 랑가랑아 보고 겨우 다 시와 데라 속바가 그 동서가 나다 때네다는 랑수 겨도야 치만보요래
It's also said that a great number of literary and artistic figures have suffered from depression, and many have even committed suicide as a result of their depression. These people including authors such as Hemingway, philosophers such as Aristotle, and even political figures such as Hitler.
실나 네 동서가 난그 파르체르다리 섬착직 장서 라나 소소 다 랑소시죠 대시게요래 다 당상 잠불는 거 완도시나 로레진도 머철 야탄바 되네 동서가 날라테네 랑거랑 다리 랑소시게요래
It's said that a third of people who suffer from depression will take their lives, and indeed every year in the world today there are 10 million people who do commit suicide.
동철가 나트 치모즈긴 레즈나 항아마 네 폴로이다 좀바 보적천 다 콩거 드니 냥한다 동철집이 때비지 그럽나 동철제제도 쉬 바로 그 직된 때라 무바짱 매바당 랑거 초아때라 이차드니 등거지 용서 저와 드니 띠떡버견도 랑거랑 소브르시르톤삼 다 랑든 직된 감는다 돈도 지양 마카 삼기 뜰다비가 묵슬 그 샘기 나타버jan지 연저래
Freud, in his work Mourning and Melancholy, described depression as an illness where one loses one's desire for the outside world. One loses all interest, in fact, in the outside world. One loses one's hope in oneself. And in general becomes extremely despondent and afflicted by ennui.
야 뭔가를 그 회나 때랑 니마 마시려가 남시 마요디 샘직 마르티노 nga 동서가 나야 그 삼고는 양 가래가 잠 와르다 그 다지 자미게 그 샘 마르티데 저런데 양 랑가 아직 동서가 나그 야그 삼나 양 가래가 지금 총게वे 총 남조 역보메디 드네 양 지금 샘 마르티디 대소 동서를 삼는다나 삼스를 요사래다 대 말에 다 티 동서가 나그 우어도 가래잖아 티 떡버 진다 다 그런 직된디 다 어떤 거 단나 드니 돈덕 마크스에 랑거랑아 예차바다 랑거랑아 보바메바 다 띠다비 샘스기래
Of course, some people might claim when they are feeling in general down for various reasons in life, maybe their business isn't going well or they're having some other kind of life problem, that they're feeling depressed. Well, this kind of, feeling of being depressed is not what we're referring to by depression. Clearly, depression is a more serious state where one's hope is extinguished, one feels very despondent, and one has very little confidence.
당 닝운이 낭운이 저 동철가 난데라 할리지 할레바가双路 동구요 동구비 염선데요 땅아 스타버드 드니 야나컴마 다나 대장 아초 보여나이나 다 동철제기 타니데요 사로 요거 말에 당상 사르고 소요래 대마또 지 시켰고 많잖나 뭐뭐보지 그 동철가 나궁우 등우증가요 말에 대전도 다키베양 치는 말에 디즈 지금 용시신을 연래 이나요 다 자노가 로총단을 개바 베 망보고 잡나더니 동서가 나빠진다 베 망보요 건데 다 코줄 샘그 등어다나 랑거 다리가 니처자가 셔디 결혼디 당아 베 샘농라 다리가 더니 등을 전부 좀 정도 대인이나 달로 망보지기네단 니타다 그 샘커다나 런거 임직심용.
So depression is something that I've paid a lot of attention to and have done research into for many years now. The reason being that I've encountered so many people, particularly young people, but also older people in China, who are experiencing and have experienced great suffering in this regard. Depression as a word, a term, didn't exist in Tibetan. It's a new word that has been invented in recent times. The condition of depression obviously, therefore, wasn't something that was particularly widespread, but certainly in my experience in China, witnessing the great mental suffering of so many people and having contact with that, this is something that, I've really regard extremely serious, and for this reason have dedicated quite a lot of effort into coming to understand this illness.
다 나때 줄고니나 나때 주버시치 그 탑대 가르제나 실동 그 내라 당상 샘컴르 방가레 그너 논식즈레 샘 영원 방에다나 되는 논식 메바존나 초코저요레 야 당상 만방가레 그 샘데 롱기 또 금종화즈레네 된디 샘다 첩보 용조원도 점기 지다만 동야다는 된자경 다레 응곡탑너레 된자세기요레.
In terms of treating this disease, there are different approaches. Psychologists may have different ways of attempting to treat the condition in terms of achieving states of mind. Doctors, at the same time, through their interventions, can attempt to control the symptoms of depression.
옛날에 다당상 회난 납쇼거만 가린 통디 tene mande chat sondi mande mandhondi yang tari semkum mabde yongre ta yena mande la tane doshok niba verna tari sem rnarda ne matapke odan ranga tari alapa la sokba ga libola ono pa yona dejindo tam chammo nin mukma la sokba nin mukgyo de la sokba ga tene doshok niba moz gore deina ta mandhongi de yang tab chig re dana de tari tab yakshude mare.
So while taking medicine may be one means of going about addressing depression, it's certainly not the best one. Clearly, when one stops taking meditation, the symptoms are still there. On the other hand, there are also all kinds of negative side effects associated with depression medication. So it's not the best means of treating depression that we have available to us.
출리라 따빠 요난자 맨난자 소지 상등군야 동인군야 더마인 바가 응응도 이제다 잠판거 샤워 접교 너추 문이 장내 그거 딱 가요로 그 나때라다리 판바요지다 나때야라 짝탑교 그 되니 니 있나 그 초와 그 냠용스르고난 자가 니 다리 럭링 것도 없고 그 체르남발라 고추 디바지.
Myself, as a Buddhist teacher, I have had experience in witnessing the great success of Buddhist methods in addressing depression. These including meditation, emptiness meditation, mindfulness meditation, the recitation of mantra, practice, helping altruistic engagement. I have had experience of all of these methods being extremely effective in treating depression.
다 도mer 네 상통고야 상통고야인데 나가수 출근하나 때 nga만이 요인데 당상 롭자 몽보지그 상네 잠바니저 상통데 탑고 너지 디츠 통통즈 그런 거 레세근데 그다나 임바샤나 베르나 디럽 갸피르갑나 갸체 침보 지발레 쫀지그갑나 척송원제나 근니 잠비 탁바이 샘기 랑친 랍떡나 샘기 랑친 땀떡나 직바 탐치 맹게르장 대와 말이 락도 톱제이다 딱 nga마그니 베르나 샘도 랑보치 따바즈레 되니 잠바 대가 수다리 잠바도 tene takbar tabazare alambo chendo takbar tabjuna kan rotum mare tiawada ngachu chambi go semdo sara ndere semdo sara korjizina toga dan jiteng kam gon jigba dan nat tamchit mare jinjo tene dewa dan gawa chowa doso tamchit yang ramji mambut mambut jindo yam jongyo zeidana saru sonyore.
So in recent times, there is a lot of discussion and a lot of enthusiasm for the meditation practice of mindfulness. This is something that has, though, always existed in the Buddhist tradition. In the great 8th century text, The Way of a Bodhisattva, there's a verse that says, "But if the elephant is firmly bound by the rope of mindfulness on every side, all fears will vanish and everything constructive will come into my hands." And so this verse is really likening the various afflictive thoughts of the mind to an elephant, and the mindfulness meditation method as the reins that bring this elephant under control. And when this is done, then positive mental experiences such as happiness, pleasure, etc., they are able to arise more readily.
Chamba nirjak gomdide sem lakteida. Tani sem jang momu binga zechchida nyambarja. Tir genda nandir ngamo yang tani nyambarja. Nabdi nyarandi yang nyambarja. Genda sowi chodna semde lodambang. Semde chamba da shijengir gone rangi rangla yinrang daftageda. Tate 지 야르 참 돈본즈이나 다롱 때라 람통다나 대전다나 지 직된린 대비 냠작 장내 모여래다 대점 마시나요 그러나 뜻다위 있는 거 당선 롭자 몽보즈나 되네 상동 공교원도 배 만자 가르침 보즈래.
So this kind of meditation where we focus single pointedly and are able to abide in this state, and in general with the various things that arise in our life, to be able to deal with them in this way is in fact a very important kind of meditation.
양 샤밥 야베다는 또 상통 검스럭 찍어래. 대치레제나 잠반이어를 잡아 주. 리 잠반이어를 잡아. 소라 잠반이어를 잡아. 셈 잠반이어를 잡아. 추 잠반이어를 잡아지. 다 잠반이어를 잡아 주고 공래.
So mindfulness meditation is one very useful practice. Another meditation practice that has great relevance to depression is contemplative meditation. So where we can talk about the 4 applications of mindfulness, contemplating the body, the emotions, the mind, and phenomena.
베나 리잠바니어를 잡아이나 드니 랑글 린더 답시조거 빡바 드네 하 차 리바 강 데라 소바 람바 젠더 타게티로니나 드니 신능 와르섬 골리 더가 스토르먼 강당 강나이나라 ngo마인고나 짱마 딱바 띠르 타비랑 젠저 라고 마라 ngaso 머장 그 로다 머장 그 카르기티로나 어단더 조화즈르 하 니하즈르 머하즈르제 베 조바 조끼가 쓰라 대등 잡아장 그 ngaso 리금 토마 와르스 막 뜨게티로나 드니 지 막상이랑 전잔즈가 무신이나 더양 리근 잠바데 자르죠.
So by contemplating the contemplation on the body, our clinging and our grasping to our physical forms can be lessened as we step by step, piece by piece, analyze each part of our body, from our skin to our bones, our blood, our organs, etc. And we come to a realization of its impure nature. This actually helps us in lessening our grasping to it.
드네 초라 등물 와서이 다 초라 있나 대화당 등물 당뇽지 역섬요래 레다나 네르급근 초라 대화 잠 요나야 남지가 네르급나 탐치부 머딱이라면서 잔자 머딱와 인저런 인저와 탐치 등물와 제이 다 초라 강당 강 있나라는 남지가 네르급나 다 머딱와다 등물이라면서 잔 마토제면 딱바 대화 겐 잡아서 요금에 놓아 때라 양 고아께 탑래.
And in terms of meditating on our emotions, this enables us to realize their impermanent nature, that there is happiness and that there is sadness, that they are essentially always changing. Anything that is changing is suffering. And so this kind of contemplation enables us to lessen our grasping towards emotions.
Tene sim jamba nyor jabate danga su sim de la ji ndam mo na ton char na ton ndam nda yore re yang rigba ga toge cherondi maung wa marche wa dana ndeba ngak charwa ta te yang kajik chawa ga ani yang da xia de cheryona tene kajik chawa te yang rangjin ji chbaz mare dendi tarti sim te yang ani yang da toge cherondi tiksum dam charwa tila matene sim me ka tiksum zendiki da drop tak zmato menu te ngishi yang da parti yon.
And by contemplating or practicing the application of mindfulness in respect of our minds, in general, our minds are full of discursive thoughts of all kinds of nature, but by focusing on the current moment and nothing else, not the past and the future, then we can come to an understanding about the nature of our mind and not cling to ideas of its essential permanence or inherent existence.
Tane chu nga sun jikten ga kamna shirur go nguboda nanga ngubo tane yodo jok tamche daftage cheryongni na tane tomba ni yimba da dagme pa yimba dere.
And the contemplation regarding phenomena encourages us to develop a realization of the empty and selfless nature of phenomena.
Jamba niyor jokbando loje ga chugur kamna ya yore nge tari jamba ni jo jze ge de kurang zu dan jang de we de gergen so le zhidong.
Of course, these 4 applications of mindfulness are in the southern tradition as well. I'm sure you know about them, yeah? Yeah.
Jang de we.
Have you learned about the 4 applications of mindfulness? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Kutosamashi. Kutoshi.
Jang de we. Nando chikbaren do da.
Is the content the same as what Khenpo has just explained?
It's Chittanupasana and about mind, and Dhammanupasana is the worldly phenomena, and is Kayanupasana about body, and the other one Vedananupasana about feeling.
Yeah, Jikpare.
야, 다 제 남바 더니 타레 곰 거와. 대 문이 대 곰나 다른가 야나 랑아치 샘컴 그 나때소 요나 맨로아다. 카르테 더가 요 카르테 맨나 마오 네컴나 샘테 나때소 응고고요래.
By engaging in this kind of meditation practice, it really does have the capacity to heal mental afflictions, heal mental illness, and for people who may not, in fact, have or feel themselves to be mentally afflicted or to suffer from a mental illness, by engaging in meditation is actually a very good preventative measure for future mental illness.
돈다가 니바다 드니 ngama 드니 오마가 감나 dagmen dana roar namjurse chudan kanzaga yever namnyik songzoi teni roa semchin de churyu shetana chu dagme pa ji bazda kanzaga dagme pa ji dana dagme ni songre khzu ngasu khasa derin ga da nat par chewaz de sim go vdak de la hajang tambur zan ba vdak de hajang toga dan zamba chimboshi chabar de nafshok mo so yinena teni ji rang de ji nyang top chewo dana rang de tambur zamba rang tam chagzong tenjaga ndishi ji chap chimbun riore dan dela tuni kirong teni yang nan ramra shong kirong na zu dir nyembo to seru chekide dangme namba nim gomjo ndkar chimbor.
And then the second Buddhist measure that can be very, very effective is selflessness. It was said by Chandrakirti that the Buddha taught two kinds of selflessness of the person and selflessness of the phenomena, so that beings may obtain liberation. In actual fact, a lot of mental illness that is suffered by people today is related to a very strong sense of self and a very strong sense of clinging and grasping to self. Maybe this is particularly strong among people in the West. In any case, meditation on selflessness, the two kinds of selflessness, is very important in this context.
돈덕 선바다 네데랑 칠남발라 tani shngak kyabar janzi donjirla tani ti shngak tela tani nyemba tela tani uni chane ga mambo ji ga ta tongser ga na ta ngi uni na ta mangak zo tani tongser ga na sirje perna ngala nga shiu mamba mare ta na nang sem ga ta ga mamba ze jona ngarang ga rang tu zam ta ngarjer zam mahim ba ga tani mambo ji ga ta tongser ga na te tani chak sangwi chani na tinja labjana ya teji topa zgdana teji droptak zgda mun samgyu ngarang la ichiyo.
And then the third measure that I would like to share with you tonight is a mantra that is very effective in addressing depression, one that I have had a great deal of personal success with, actually, in helping other people to overcome their depression. While I may not be a doctor of the body, I have, without any sense of pride or arrogance, have had great success in helping many people overcome depression through this method. So I would, in fact, refer to it as my main pith instruction.
단디 상형도 ngang데라 총거 랑깅운이양 냠린 인롱우 바르도 시니연 체레제나가 지르고 야치 꺄길로 랍도 쇼니 로 시미 갑데나 드니 사차 잠바즈가 추추샤단 조디 드니 다 람금 캄보 다즈르제지 곰바가 나네 콩르긴 자송아 콩르 야거네 공아레 드니 콩르 야거네 온디 ngala 이게 칸돈 덤바즈 준송 디 덤바도 잠바 총에 지금 당일 쉐게 말하다 디는 거 이게 덴마크 찍도 다스타와르도 그게 그 런거 린던 거 잡도 zonje 다 치르남빙 가레가 처음 맞던 수인는데 옛매치네요 다 되게 치었다니 있는데라 지금 산로를 따내다 그다리 엉덩이 군이 응우요니 쓰르즈레 대니나 니 이게 데만드 땅 아담 냠도 물론 니시담바 나강아 송나라는 리다 맘저레 되게 딩이 진던 창에 송린.
And this mantra, this tantric mantra, was actually given to me in 1986. It's one that I have practiced for almost 30 years now. Back then, I was on my way to a teaching in a monastery, and on the way, I met with Khenpo Deza, who had actually returned from India, and he gave me this instruction manual or practice manual, and I have one page of it here, and I really feel that it has extraordinary efficacy, and I've experienced this and have continued its practice over almost 30 years.
ngarangi 시각 담보메 치레제나 지 가성의 롭작 가만에 주자니엔 담보 지 만바에 삼는더니 기르긴에 삼는 시가 잠바가 일진 라테는 기른로아진 근데 지마 단디노나 뭐 산기 뭐요와지 오늘에 다 산기 뭐요와도 런거 샘지 게로하다 샘기 등을 모으서 세르제 쉬어요래 다 띠인디 지망인디 이게 때니다나 당운이 ngaran거 삼나요 샤와 강다 강점나 지 유튜브 담보 되니 샤와 다리가 ngoyor ngayo denraz lechak moyen denina de ngiren gina ta cheren go ye cheren chi mache yong ka tariang ngiren gina de ji niba chimbo da shenlup chimbo zar tsagyo.
To begin with, I wouldn't describe myself as someone who was unmovable in my personality. I went through many phases of wanting to be a doctor, wanting to be a teacher, and etc. But really from the point in time that I began to do this practice and chant this mantra of the Akshobhya Buddha, the immovable one, I really discovered that my undertakings, my endeavors and my aspirations became solid, became stable, and I have great belief. I don't know whether or not, in fact, you do, you might or you might not, but I really feel that this mantra is one that has great power and also great power of blessing.
다데나 지마 디 흥각다나 이게 지외온 말에 그 임접주 온도 때네 지 척직네 범거야르마도나 때네 나랑 딱하니 뭐몽보지가 지 뭐몽보즈가 던다제 맘뇨 옛날에 게르게 때네 지가 다 코랑 안바 나가 때제니나 다 춘디 범 흑직야르마 톤조 제 때네 뭐몽보즈도 때네 다리 적송 저런 강타리야나 노바요지 말했삼고 출리가 잠바 소이나 냠슬랑네나 허르낭 아주 힘만이나 힘만도 출릭 답바 요메 단텐자 말해 ngakni badeyo janjare dela ji chulik jamba tan tabba yome ke chabar mare dela niba chabar janzo de msi nyamsu lana ya tari chongje deina taga namba chola terang ye musur ke jiskin monzga taga tagai cherongeda terang indi ngak tari cher namba mara taga 지금 돈지네 되네 제 넘버 곰코요나 라랑 급지잖아 되네 지마 잠바가 수 예저난 된다면 요네나 코랑 라타리가 테스타반 동갑지나 냔제.
So this mantra, in fact, doesn't have many words. It has, in fact, only 10 syllables. It's not one that I've, taught or before lots and lots of people, but certainly on an individual basis over time I've really shared it with a lot of people, and they've really had enjoyed great success from it. I don't feel it's one that you necessarily have to have religious faith in order to derive efficacy from, in the same way that medicine can be beneficial to people regardless of whether they have a particular belief or not. I feel that this mantra has efficacy in and of itself. So if you have the need, feel free to write it down, and in the future if you encounter someone who would be in need of it or who would benefit from it, feel free to share it with them.
단데 옴잔자 마하로카나 홍팟 오야 옴잔자 마하로카나 홍팟 옴잔자 마하로카나 홍팟 단데 딸이 그러나 랑커 랑거지가 나토다 된다지 말에 맞총 보그 사차나 다래가 드니 다 하정 괴바 진보 좀 펌거 공급 축송을 주잖아 단디 흥각도 란 지금 돈제스 있나 더건 잠보는 걸 하다 흘러다 노진 라소바 탐치 다리가 노바 탐치 저런 송어래.
The efficacy of this mantra is not something that I'm making up myself. I should add here that I forgot to add before that Kempo would advise somebody who would like to recite this mantra to recite it 10 times or even upwards of to 100,000 of times for benefit. In any case, the great efficacy potency of this mantra was described by the great Tibetan master Mipan Rinpoche, who described it as having the power to surmount all of the deities, nagas and spirits.
대전도 름느 탐sit 다리가 매버린 게로 하다나 삼매 비링알라 소바거 득바 탐sit 적버린 게로 송을.
The ability to even rectify or purify any of the 5 boundless actions that are undertaken.
네, 다지 지르게 왕작 저거 나츠 레카 감접니나 출랍되는 레카 접교 ndso 탐sit 양탁버는 접기다나. 대전도 다 듣당 varchilla 소바가 드니 강기 양 멋지게 다나 대덕 탐sit 더 단디 흥역도나 출글라 따빠 요난자 맨난자 드니 랑라 때따위 나 요난자 맨난자 닝우니 난다 하정 가르침보서 써요.
And in terms of the various activities and endeavors we engage in our everyday life, it gives us the ability to carry these out very effectively and smoothly, to overcome obstacles, to eradicate barriers. Regardless of whether we have religious faith or not, it's a mantra with great potency, whether we are afflicted with illness or whether we are not.
다 때론더니 네 나추고 조박은디 대런 그 차트인데 조직 고직 잡직 소래 더 잡직 존이나 니 나추고 공바 나추고 다 런거 셈기 납주르시 지그 토모 마임비 망어 때다리 케르남바 대랑 단다나 레디오 그 너쇼고 마이난자가 샤르쇼고 마이난자가 마총 청마라 셈기 난메사도 배 공부래 대인이나 참말라 다리 편비체도 되는 엄숙스르고 더가 버라인.
So tonight, because tonight's teaching was organized by the Buddhist Society here at Cambridge University, I wanted to share with you this profound teaching, a pith instruction. Today, people without mental afflictions are extremely few, and so I would, and I decided that I would like to share with this great teaching with everybody, regardless of whether they're from the East or from the West or wherever. It really does have great power.
네, 엄숙스르도 지고바지가 더가 돈다니요. 돈다 찍더 맞춘 연등 그 소화가 쳤다 맞세가 쳤다 내서 강당 강쇼나 대체 쇼나 자가 등으로 쇼나 자 더가 단 소위 여름 그 쳤다 내서 강라 특나 아더니 점바 첨부 무직지다나 당 아주 멋지지긴데 지 대체 단 등으로니가 라마리다 아주 사차 mambo나 카회즈고 너래 라리 잡나 터지 시트 잡나 드그레제 네 멋지지기도 답변나 람 통보즈가 야르 jar나 양 마라 터즈 바브란제 양 더가 탕즈가 하라 손디 양 라즈간 고르고나 아주 런코리 있나 사차 소소소소 로고디 드니 람 잠자 모원 조건도가 대당 자와가 멋진데 양나 지 니마치그 베르나 다리스 다 런거 셈그 가마 있나 ngacho dingmur shiro derkir yene shiro dewa yene yam 상공 오늘 끝나냐 초라 잠바요네 다 땡진 직된 zire 대니나 네서강라 특나야 참마가 야라지 셈그 스톱식 기에 되나 더가 네 샤완도 조 탐치다 동린 샤완도 조 탐치다 당린 시죠 좀바 시죠 너까지 쳔보래.
The other thing that I would like to talk or to urge as extremely important in our lives, it's inevitable that we will confront all kinds of ups and downs. Moments of happiness, moments of unhappiness. We have a saying, an idiom in Tibetan, which says, after you go up a mountain, then you go down. After a moment of happiness, then there's sadness. This changeable nature is in fact the absolute reality of our everyday lives, and it's very important that in the face of whatever we encounter, that we maintain a mind that is at ease.
아니 긴던가 다리 공동이 지지래 다 출가 로종 시지 점직 시진데 다 디름 열식 발라 몇 돈으로 와서래 체레제나 다 추가 드니 담에 그타와 있나 자가 스템저 그타와 있나 자가 너초가 수암로 되가 마추 긴던가 초아텔라 판바 이게 침보도 토거요래.
The other thing is, particularly in the 21st century, the study and the research into Buddhism is absolutely indispensable, whether it be the view of selflessness or whether it be dependent origination. All of these views, these doctrines, are of direct and absolute relevance to our everyday lives.
가성한다나 제조인데 간프를 높쳤네 타르시는 걸 로마 다 지금 그런 거 때문에 야채제와 하고 견지 그 헤르블레가 로존 치기요스 다 로존 신우 띠 르하다 때문에 오늘 전에 그 그런 몸 살게요스 가리 점점 가리 되나 당아서 가르쇼고 뭐 디르디르다가 가모지가 내까나 때문에 난 샘기 어네서다 시를 공부본다 졸라 딱신 된자스 더주산 배 얌선 지고제 오늘 전에 된다래 아주 시공부원도 시나 다 야가리 난자 보이리 난자 백교보래 레다 난 샘기 야라 나트만 난 샘데 야라 지 헤르 짤 파리오노 닝오네나 카르쇼데나 오네가 지 참에 로정 시기지나 베나 제체제발라가 교인직인 진정나 다로 딘자 몽보지그나나 데니 그런 거 따반데 말아 척도요 말아 아주 뭐는 바 롭자 침보 롬구 통그 때니 샷좀 전에나 그런 맛이 공간에 종이 직된 감수 시차러라 또 대단 잡아서 많이 바가 좀 되라 용 되라 차치요노도 맞좀 처음에 꼴고너래
In particular, the way of the Bodhisattva, written in the 8th century, this is something that everybody, particularly students engaged in their doctoral research or whatever it may be, should really read, and it contains such amazing wisdom. In actual fact, I encountered a student who had actually graduated, and they remarked to me about just how amazing, in fact, they found this wisdom, even in general, even though we can say that in terms of the outer level of development, places like Tibet, etc., are, really quite poor, but the intense wisdom of, this text and others like it is insurpassable and very much worth the study and attention of everyone.
다땡이 산지바가 출로라 직체때야라 또 고야나라 된자 참에 가르제나 맞소 점선다 담바야나 산지 출력 바텔라야나 운이 짠에 거바도나 쳐래 고아 거바도나데 거바데 다 돈토라 송요다 데니 차다단요네나 데니 출력바가 껴이래 데 그런 거 땅도 말로나 그런 거 껴이래 데나 마란 수이나 운이 지 산지비 출력이나 다 잠바 쓰고 그런 데라 거바도나 거바데 달린 지기요래 데 거바데 똥초래 거바데 똥고래 맞소 보규 나던 거 나나야나 빼 쪼바데 데니 로란 탐치 거 나나 로종 탐치 거 나나 쪼바데 가르침 몰랐어래.
And in terms of, raising objections, engaging with the teachings critically, this is absolutely advisable. There is absolutely no problem whatsoever with objections being raised, and indeed they should. Within the Tibetan tradition, we regard debate and rational investigation as really being the crux of our study methodology.
돈더 타마더 ngachu chongmaga tene janla phambaga shawa drupjinda perna ji gele ga thak dan khori chongkyup ko shawa inna jaga tene napa dan chapchurwa dan dchola jigdare jindang ko tene phamba drupjo chabrd rana susunguni tene ji phama gekho dchola kurta dan shankyung shijo hajang kar chembore nga europe ka sachana yongde tene genko mombo go 다 그런 존나 부거 땅키 메데나 tene 그런 흐송레 제게 남트로 mombo sor근도 된저이나 녜되나 가수 hershuk 수이나 파마다 길근라 쩐는지이다 tene 쩐 첨보 탐치 근어나 파마다 길근도 쓰고요래 tene 로총 수이네나 데라 정수 쳇더야 베 다리 좀바게 첨보 쉬고요래 된저스 그거니 tene 랑기 파마다나 다 genkon도 수시사서 그 잔조아 미르다나 던조그 참말라 지 라니 거에 그거는 샤와가 판바줍지 원데 가르쳐야래.
And then the final thing that I would like to stress is the absolute importance of doing things that benefit others, whether that be other human beings or other animals, whether it be work towards protection of the environment or towards helping ill people or refugees, whatever it may be. One thing in particular is the importance of looking after elderly family members. The Eastern tradition talks about the great debt of gratitude that younger people have to teachers and to parents. This is extremely important. However, in coming to Europe, Kempo has heard of many instances where many old people have essentially died in situations where they haven't had the care or attention of their children. So looking after one's parents and fulfilling these responsibilities is clearly an important thing to do.
Thank
Thank you very much.